Okay, so we're continuing. We're continuing learning through Sifsei Chein. We started talking about last time. We were talking about the idea of the Or Ein Sof and the tachlis behind the purpose, the tachlis, the goal behind creation. That the Or Ein Sof, so to speak, has a chisaron kaviyachol. The Or Ein Sof within the system that Hakadosh Baruch Hu decides to create through the Or Ein Sof, the Or Ein Sof, so to speak, again kaviyachol, 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 but the Or Ein Sof experiences a chisaron, and the chisaron is that chol katov lehetiv, that the Or Ein Sof wants something. It wants to be mative to others. It wants to the definition of the goodness and the tachlis hashlemus of tov that the Or Ein Sof exhibits. The essential meat of the Or Ein Sof is hatava, and that means that that goodness has to be given and expressed. And you can't express it if there's no one to express it to. Ein melech below am. If there's no one to see and appreciate what you're giving, and if there's no one to give to, then you're not a giver. You just are. And so, again, so to speak, there's a chisaron that exists, or there's the appearance of a chisaron within the Or Ein Sof, that the Or Ein Sof wants to give, but has no one to give to. And so because of that, there needs to be the ratzon hanelam, right? The ratzon hapashit, the unfathomable desire of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is that I'm going to create something. I'm going to create things in order to give goodness to those things. The goodness that I give to those things is their ability and their opportunity and their experience of being mistavik to me. They're going to experience yichud with me, hishtavus hatzura, alignment with my midos, with their midos, like the Gemara says in Sota. How can we be misdavik to HaKadosh Baruch Hu? HaKadosh Baruch Hu is an Eshel Chalas. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is a consuming fire, like he describes over here also, right? The Or Ein Sof just consumes everything. How can you connect to that? How can you be mistavik? But that's what the Gemara says. You're mistavik with it by fulfilling v'halachta b'drachav and aligning your midos with the midos of HaKadosh Baruch Hu as we understand them to be and as they're revealed to us. And that's how we connect with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so to speak, through an alignment of our character with HaKadosh Baruch Hu's character, so to speak. That's the ultimate tov that we can experience. If God is the ultimate goodness, then us becoming as much like the ultimate goodness as possible is the greatest good we can experience. And we talked about how in order for that goodness to be fully experienced, it has to be earned, right? If you give it to me for free, and then I haven't earned it, I just got it as a freebie, and I can't look you in the face. Nahama de kisufa, bread of shame. You hand me a loaf of bread, and I didn't earn the loaf of bread, then I can't really sort of enjoy the loaf of bread fully because I know it's not really mine. I didn't really deserve it. I didn't really earn it. I just got it as a freebie. And so if HaKadosh Baruch Hu were giving us all of the goodness and connection and dveikus and the experience of alignment and oneness with HaKadosh Baruch Hu for free, so to speak, then there would be something missing in what we're experiencing. And the truth is, we spoke out that that's how things were in the pre-creation state of the Or Ein Sof, right? Everything that ends up being created, nothing is new. Ein kol chadash tachas hashemesh. Nothing is actually new. We were all there. All of this, all of us, and all of this was there within the Or Ein Sof as potentially there, as potentially existing, prior to it actually being brought out into creation. And if that's so, then we were already experiencing yichud with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We were already experiencing total alignment with the Ratzon Hashem. We were the Ratzon Hashem. We were part and parcel of the Ratzon Hashem. We were neshamos that were stuck in tachas kisei hakavod that HaKadosh Baruch Hu decides to pull out and send down here into the world. But before they get sent down here into the world, they were part and parcel of the essence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu itself. So we were already experiencing that yichud within the state of the Or Ein Sof. So what was missing? What was missing is our ability to feel like we earned it, right? We're forced into it at that point because we are the thing we're part of, and we are experiencing the midos and the dveikus with the Or Ein Sof because we are part and parcel of the Or Ein Sof and can only conceptualize our existence as such. So we can't experience ourselves as becoming like HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We can't experience ourselves as earning the ability to experience dveikus and hishtavus satsura and alignment and valachta b'drachav and so on and so forth. And so in order for us to experience that, there has to be a break, so to speak. The Kadosh Baruch Hu has to take a step back. And so that's where kind of we got up to, where we were describing that before when there's just an Or Ein Sof, nothing else exists. Our experience of being creations that exist within the world can't exist either. The Or Ein Sof is all annihilating and all encompassing, has no space for anything else to exist in the face of it. There are no tables, there are no chairs, apples, oranges, me and you, because apples and oranges are really the same thing. They're just Or Elokus. They're just the Ratzon Hashem. The Ratzon Hashem looks differently because it's being projected in a different way, but they're really the same thing. And tables or chairs are the same thing. And me and you are the same thing. We're just neshamos, and neshamos are just expressions of the Ratzon Hashem. And the Ratzon Hashem is indivisible because the Kadosh Baruch Hu is indivisible, and there's no difference between his Ratzon and his Atzmos, and therefore there's no difference between any of this. So none of this can really exist. None of us can really exist, not as defined beings, not as defined things. And so in order for anything to exist, there has to be what he now goes on to explain as he explains the concept of Tzimtzum. There has to be somewhat of a diminution or a refraction or a hiddenness or a hiding of this Or Ein Sof. So that's kind of where we got up to. And we continue on the bottom, in the main text, on the bottom of page Yud. At this point, right, where HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants to create Olamos, wants to create the ability to have consciousness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We can't have consciousness unless there's a need to have consciousness, right? We say every morning, Moda Ani Lefanecha, right? One of the most important words there is Ani, Moda Ani Lefanecha. That the part of the Kavanah, the Balatani talks about this, others talk about this. One of the essential kavanos in Moda Ani is to appreciate that there is an ani to be Moda. If we don't appreciate that there's an ani to be Moda, then we're missing the whole point of the thing. I have been created. I woke up this morning and I am a me. I am me and I am here, and therefore I can appreciate all of this stuff. I can have the experience of appreciating, the experience of being alive. Rabba Munasecha, you have trust in me, in a thing that actually exists. And that's my experience of actually existing. That's very, very significant. So in order to have that, Ma asa Hashem Yisbarach. So what does Hashem do in order to create that, to kick off that experience, to kick off that possibility? Ma asa Hashem Yisbarach. Tzimtzum v'silek kaviyachol min oro hagadol u'tzdadim. He is mitzamtzem. He reduces, he hides, he refracts, he constricts. It's hard to translate Tzimtzum exactly, but he makes small, he contracts, he pinches, so to speak, his light, this great light, this Or Ein Sof, and he refracts it away to the sides. V'hishir be'emtza, and in the middle, he leaves makom chalal upanoi b'vchinas igol. He leaves a circular shaped empty space. Shebesocha chalal hazan, within this circular empty space, nishtal shalu v'nivro kol halamos halyonim v'tachtonim. Within this empty space, all of the olamos halyonim, the olamos hatachtonim, the higher worlds, higher consciousnesses, more clear consciousness and awareness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu and the totality of the Or Ein Sof, and less awareness, more awareness of the existence of nivraim, of creations that exist in a material sense. All of that unfolds within this space at the center of the Or Ein Sof that is left empty, so to speak, by the Tzimtzum. V'chol hamalachim b'srafim v'ofanim, and within that space also it gets filled with malachim and srafim and ofanim, right? Different kinds of malachim. V'chol haberuim kulam mikatim v'agadol, and all of the created things, from the biggest to the smallest, everything ends up within this space of Tzimtzum. V'lachein nikra HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'tar makom, and this is why HaKadosh Baruch Hu is called makom. Kamo shekinuhu chachmenu zal b'shem makomo shel olam. As Chazal say in Bereshis Rabbah that hu makomo shel olam ve'eino olam makomo, that he, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, is the place within which the world exists, rather than him existing within the world, as if the world is a place within which HaKadosh Baruch Hu exists. Why? So on one level, we can understand that because what's going on is we have the Ar Ein Sof, and within the Ar Ein Sof, within the space, within the makom, created by the Tzimtzum of the Ar Ein Sof, now everything else exists within that space. So by definition, the Ein Sof, is the makom within which all of these other things exist. Okay, now, and why? Al Shem Sha'asa Be'etzem Oro Kaviyachol Makom Panu L'Brias Olamos, because he, so to speak, made within the essence of this light, the essence of this expressed Giloy of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Ar Ein Sof, he made, so to speak, an empty space for the creation of all of the worlds, all of the, again, worlds, not spaces, not physical spaces, not spiritual spaces, not dimensions, not places, not planets, not universes, not galaxies, but levels of awareness, levels of consciousness of the reality of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. All of that is taking place within this Tzimtzum, within this space that exists within the Ar Ein Sof. V'zeh hachalal nikra b'sfarim hakadoshim chalal hapanoi, and the Mekubalim refer to this as this space of the Tzimtzum, where the Tzimtzum took place. This is referred to as the chalal hapanoi, the empty space, the empty void. O tahiru ilah, or the elevated pure illumination.
So Baruch Kvod Hashem and
Oh, very good. Yeah. So so how would you translate that?
Well, that we bless Hashem's kavod from His place, which is that gap.
So Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuso. Sorry, which one? What was the pasuk? Oh, Baruch Hashem. Okay, got it. In Kedusha. Yes. 100%. So Kedusha plays on a lot of these concepts. Actually, there's a lot there that relates to a lot of these concepts. We find, especially right in Kedusha's Keser. We started talking about this last time, but the dual ideas of Malek Koharet Kavodo, right, as well as Aye Makom Kavodo, both of which we find expressed within Kedusha's Keser. Aye Makom Kavodo is where are you? And Malek Koharet Kavodo is you're everywhere. Everything is you. Your kavod fills everything, right? And likewise, right? And so the same thing like what you're saying. Yeah, these are all very, very present in Kedusha, 100%. Okay, so a couple things. I mean, not more than a couple things to flesh out here with respect to Tzimtzum. So, first of all, like we said last time, we have to appreciate that everything we're talking about here is al derech mashal, right? So there is no actual infinite light, right? We're not talking about light, we're not talking about sunlight or anything like that. That's a mashal for the thing that we're talking about, okay? Even those mikubalim, right? There's a wide ranging, back in the, and this is very relevant to Tzimtzum, but 100 years ago, 200 years ago, 150, 200 years ago, 250 years ago, even earlier than that, there's hot debates taking place about the extent to which any of this stuff should be taken literally. It means what it says, or it's all a mashal. Right now, there are two sides to this that both have good reasons for them. Right, on the one hand, if we're going to say that this stuff is all just a mashal, so then this stuff becomes not so serious, right? This is like tortoise and the hare. It's trying to teach me that these are fairy tales, these are parables, Aesop's fables. Like it's metaphorical. If it's metaphorical, if it's a mashal for something, so then we have to be talking about this or talking about that, and the words that we're using are not really that important, right? What is it? We're not talking about real things here. If so, what's the point of what we're doing? On the other hand, if we're talking about real things, that is also very problematic, because first of all, we're not there yet, but we're going to get to a point where we're going to be talking about things that are very megushan, and very material, very, very physical. We're going to talk about body parts that relate to different spheros and different levels of neshamos enclosed and sitting in different body parts. And we're not talking about ourselves. We're talking about higher olamos and the way that the Seder Hashtalshalos works and the way the world unfolds. And so it becomes very hard to say that these things are literal. And even the things we're talking about now are in Sof. Okay, so it sounds like a very lofty concept, but if I'm really going to apply or to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that's a big problem, right? And if I'm going to take the term Tzimtzum literally, this is also potentially a very big problem. Less asar panu minei. There's nothing is devoid of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's impossible for anything to be devoid of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's impossible for there to be anything that exists that is not being thought into existence at this very moment by the Ratzon Hashem. Because if you take away the Ratzon Hashem, like Rav Chaim Volozhiner describes in Nefesh HaChaim, if HaKadosh Baruch Hu withdraws his Ratzon for an instant, everything collapses. Nothing exists independent of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. By definition, it can't be. If something exists independent of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, then HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not Echad, Yachad, and Miyuchad anymore. There's not one HaKadosh Baruch Hu. There's now multiple forces in the world. There's HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and the things that seem to be that are able to exist without HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and they're not dependent on HaKadosh Baruch Hu, at least once they're put into place. Right? The classic mashal: if I'm a carpenter and I make a table. And then I walk away from making the table. So I'm still here and the table is still here. And the table is no longer dependent on me. It was dependent on me to be made. If I hadn't made the table, there wouldn't be a table. But once I make the table can exist independent of me. And if I die, the table will still be here. Right? So that means that the table has an independent existence that is separate from me, and I'm not everything. And the table is not a figment of my imagination. I'm not the makom of the table because I can disappear and the table will continue to exist. And that's highly problematic also, if we're talking about HaKadosh Baruch Hu and the way we understand what HaKadosh Baruch Hu is. So it's hard, so even those who say that, well, you have to take Kisvei Arizal seriously, and all of this stuff means what it says. The Leshem was very, very strong in taking this position, and he wrote harsh things about the Ramchal, although he didn't mention him by name, but wrote very harshly against the Ramchal and the Ramchal's interpretations of the Mashalim he didn't bother writing about the Baal Shem Tov because he's a hardcore Litvak. He doesn't have to bother writing about the Baal Shem Tov. By the end of the 1800s, these are battles already fought, and I'm not goris these things. But the Ramchal, he's goris the Ramchal, and the Gra takes the Ramchal seriously, and the Leshem has to take the Ramchal seriously, but he rips him to shreds in harsh terms. He doesn't name him as such, but he rips him to shreds for talking explicitly that the terms we're talking about here are mishalim. And he says, no, every single one of these words means exactly what it says. There's really an Arin Sof, and there's really a Tzimtzum.
That's the process.
The Leshem, who is the Leshem Shavo V'Achlama, Rav Shlomo Yashiv, who is within the Graz tradition of Kabbalah.
Right. So here he brings down from Shomer Munim the opposite.
Yeah. Right, 100%, 100%. And
so that's what you're saying. That's the period you're referring to. That's when this machlokus came up.
The machlokus is really, the harshest levels of this machlokus were really like the Gra and the Balatanya, right? That's
later.
Which
Shomer
Munim's earlier. Shomer Munim is it's not Shomer Munim. I assume he's talking about the Shomer Munim Hakadmon. Rav Ergas, the Italian Batobel who lived in the late 1600s, early 1700s, I believe. I don't think he's talking about Rav Roth. I don't think that's who he's talking about.
Right, that was my mistake.
I could be wrong, but I know he does. Where is this? Here it is. Shomer Munim Hakadmon. Vikuach Chein. Yeah, this is the Italian. This is the Italian Shomer Munim. Yeah. This is the Italian Shomer Munim. But these are debates that raged in the generations after the Arizal about how literal or unliteral should we take these things. But even the Leshem, who says these things are literal, says that they're literally referring to things that do not correspond to how we understand these terms. So he says they're literal. In other words, it seems to me, at least in my understanding of the Leshem, and I've discussed this with a few people who are experts in the Leshem, and they've agreed with this, and that the Leshem Hashem is trying to reinforce the reverence that we have for the Kisvei Arizal, the terminology of the Arizal. But he understands very well that there's no thing called or. Meaning, when we use the term or, we have something in mind, right? It refers to something in the real world. And the term or, although the Arizal means it literally, the thing it means at much higher levels of Ruchnius is not the thing that we use it to refer to.
I always, not always, after I started thinking, I interpret it as an energy and a sensation. Like we have sensations and we have like a pleasure drinking a beer, and I have a bigger pleasure eating a ribstick.
Right.
Kind of levels of sensation.
Right. So
nothing to do with physical item.
Right, but that means that means that or is a no. So I think you're right, but that means that or is a mushal or something, right? So the risk of that. So why didn't the Arizal use different terminology? Why did he use or?
Maybe that's the best way to put it.
Maybe. So
I guess. Just be dramatic, seriously.
So it could be, right? I mean, because these conjure up certain pictures in our minds.
The way I describe it is going to draw attention to my work.
Right. Maybe, yeah, maybe so. I mean, so yeah. So
you see Lahavdil.
Yeah.
The other side, all busy with this light.
Yeah.
And it sounds exciting. What happens if they explain it the way I did? Not going to get any hits on YouTube.
This is true.
Anyway.
Although, yeah, okay. So when we talk about something like Tzimtzum, this is one of the things we have to keep in mind. That right, we're Tzimtzum among all the other terminologies we're talking about, right? This applies to each and everything we're talking about here. When we say Ma Asa Hashem Yisbarach Tzimtzum B'Silik Kaviyachol Min Oro Hagadol Tzdadim, that he was mitzamtzem, HaKadosh Baruch Hu was mitzamtzem this light, this Or Ein Sof, to the side. What's the side? The side is also a mashal, right? Meaning the description that the Arizal gives us of what's happening is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Ein Sof, decides to pull the Or Ein Sof back away from the center of the Or Ein Sof, and take that Or Ein Sof and pull it outwards to the edges of that center circle, to the edges. Now, all of this describes things in space. We can draw them, right? In fact, Rav Chaim Vital, when he records the Arizal's teachings, right, he includes a picture of a circle with a little dot in the middle, right? As if the circle is the Or Ein Sof and the dot in the middle is the Tzimtzum, as if we can depict these things spatially. We can't. We're not talking about space right now. Right, the truth, right? Space is created by the Tzimtzum. It doesn't exist outside the Tzimtzum. The Tzimtzum and the Or Ein Sof don't exist within space. The Tzimtzum is part of what creates the ability for space to exist in the first place. And what does it mean that this Or Ein Sof is being pulled back to the edges of this circle of the Cholol Hapani? And what is a Cholol Hapani? An empty space. Empty of what? Empty in what sense? Empty like a room is empty? A room is empty, but there are walls and there's a definition to the room. So what's the definition and what defines this Cholol Hapani exactly? So we have to appreciate that all these, especially al derech Chasidus, we have to appreciate that all of these terminologies are really trying to convey to us nimshalim that are ideally should be taken al derech avoda. They're trying to communicate to us things that we can appreciate as important ways of experiencing and appreciating our avodas Hashem. So what is Tzimtzum, right? So again, the Gra, the Baal Tanya, others, mostly the Hasidic Welt and the Litvish Welt had this big machlokes: Tzimtzum kipshuto, Tzimtzum lo kipshuto. Is Tzimtzum literal or is Tzimtzum not literal? Right? The Arizal says that the Ein Sof is mitzamtzem the Or away from the center, right? So if you say it, I guess it's true. And you leave a Cholol Hapani empty. It's empty. Does that mean there's no God in this space? There's no Or Ein Sof here anymore. There's no right? The Or Ein Sof, we said, is a mashal for the revelation or the clarity or the expression of the Ratzon Hashem. Does that mean the Ratzon Hashem is not being expressed within that Ha'apani anymore? It's not here. It's disappeared. As if, so to speak, God sets the world in motion and then, looks at it at a distance. I'm not there. I'm here. And I watch all of the things unfold down there. And I sometimes push some buttons and pull some levers to make things go the way I want to. But that's remote from me. I'm over here. You're over there. I made the world, but now I'm removed from the world. Right. So he quotes here in the Levias Chein. He quotes from the Balatanya and Shar Yichud V'Amuna, which is very, very profound and amazing work that's tagged on to what we typically think of as the Tanya. He writes to Maran Hatanya Kadisha Herech Levar Shgagas Miktas Chachamim Beinehem. He explains at length what he understands to be the error of certain Chachamim. Hashem Yechaper Ba'adam, God should forgive them. Shashagu V'to Be'yunim B'kisvei Arizal, who made a mistake in their understanding of the Arizal. V'havinu inyan hatzimtzum hamuz karsham kipshuto, and they thought that when the Arizal talks about Tzimtzum, he means it literally. Sha'kadosh Baruch Hu silik atzmo malhuso chas v'shalom me'olam hazeh, that God, so to speak, God forbid, actually removed his essence and his presence and his existence from this world. And it's just that he's running things. He's a puppeteer playing with the marionette from a distance, but he's not the puppet. He's just the puppeteer. The puppet exists, and the puppeteer controls the puppet, but they're separate from each other. V'ine, and Milvad she'i efshar klal lomar inyan hatzimtzum kipshuto shehu memekre haguf al hakadosh baruch hu anivdal mehem riba revavos havdalos adin kates. Aside from the fact that it's impossible to say this, because as soon as you say that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is mitzamtzing literally, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu literally removes himself from someplace, that's already giving HaKadosh Baruch Hu physical or material attributes that can't possibly exist. And God is infinite times, thousands of times removed from such things, right? What is it? If I'm going to interpret Tzimtzum literally, what does it mean? It means that God is here, and now God is there. God was in this space, and now God is not in this space because he's in another space. The only way that can happen is if there's a guf to God, if there's a material, physical, spatial definition to God. And we certainly cannot say that. And if there is no material, spatial, physical definition and character to God, then what can we say? We can't talk about God in relation to being in space and not being in space. I'm in this seat, and now I moved over to a different seat, and now this seat is empty, and I'm occupying a different spot. That can't apply if you're not physical, because spatial dimensions don't apply. So aside from the fact that saying that Tzimtzum is literal suggests strongly that God is defined by spatial dimension, and that's very, very problematic. It also can't be that they can't say such a thing, because these people, these tachamim that have made this mistake, they're ma'aminim b'nei ma'aminim. They believe, just like we believe, everyone believes, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu knows all of creation, and governs them, oversees them. And therefore, and it can't be that God's knowledge, HaKadosh Baruch Hu's knowledge of creation, changes anything or adds anything or takes away anything or alters anything within HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Right? If HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Ani Hashem lo shanisi, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is unchanging and unchangeable by definition. Nothing can add from HaKadosh Baruch Hu because HaKadosh Baruch Hu to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not missing anything. Nothing can detract from HaKadosh Baruch Hu because HaKadosh Baruch Hu is unalterable. Nothing outside of HaKadosh Baruch Hu exists, and even if it did exist, nothing outside of HaKadosh Baruch Hu could possibly change HaKadosh Baruch Hu. If so, if creation existed outside, if the Tzimtzum is a place where God doesn't exist and God observes the created world from the outside, that means that God looks down on the created world and learns about it, knows about it. we do this, we do that. This gets invented, that gets invented. Every change that takes place affects God's knowledge of what's happening down here, because God is up there looking down. And the same way as, if I'm watching a movie, so as the movie unfolds, God forbid, but if I'm watching a movie and as the movie unfolds, my awareness begins to change. I'm now knowing things that I didn't know before because I'm watching the story unfold. So my knowledge, my yediyah, is evolving as the story is evolving, as I'm watching the story. But that can't be with respect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Because we say, and the Rambam postulates this as a basic fundamental idea about HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's based on Aristotle, but it's fundamental to the idea of an Echad Yachid Miyuchad, a really singularity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is this knowledge. This knowledge is part and parcel of HaKadosh Baruch Hu itself. I don't know things. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, doesn't know things from outside himself, and so the knowledge of those things change HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Can't be. Rather, the things that HaKadosh Baruch Hu knows, as the Rambam says, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu enu yodea medea shechutz mimenu. HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't know things as if they're knowledge that exists outside himself. Kivnei adam shehu v'daitum shnayim, like a person whose knowledge and their essence are two different things. Elohu yis'ala shemo v'daitu echad. Rather, when it comes to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and HaKadosh Baruch Hu's knowledge are the exact same thing. And the things that HaKadosh Baruch Hu knows, hu yodea, hu yediyah, hu yodea, hu ha-yediyah, v'hu ha-noda. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the knower, the Rambam says. He is the thing that is known, and he's the knowledge itself. None of these things are, there's no separation in these things within HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So it can't be, the Baal HaTanya is saying, it can't be that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is removed from creation and looking at it from the outside in. Makes no sense. Can't be. Rather, Tzimtzum has to be shelo kipshuto. It has to be non-literal. When we use the term tzimtzum es oro, that the light, the Ein Sof has been removed, it can't literally be removed. It can't mean literally removed. So what are we saying? So the basic understanding is, certainly within Hasidus, but the truth is that this is not really limited to Hasidus. I can prove to many, many ways that even in Litvish Kabbalah, in Lithuanian Kabbalah, in the Kabbalah of the Gra, this is very clearly the case. Also, Chaim Volozhin writes this explicitly, and the Gra makes this point in many, many places, and the Leshem also makes this point in many, many places, that Tzimtzum is really a matter of concealment. It's not a matter of removal, it's a matter of concealment. What's happening with the Tzimtzum is not that the Or Ein Sof is disappearing. It's not that the presence and active presence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is removed from a certain space within reality, and now that space is empty of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and because it's empty of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, other things other than HaKadosh Baruch Hu can exist within that space. That's not what we're talking about. Rather, what we're saying is everything in that space is exactly as it was before. It was full of the Or Ein Sof before, it's full of the Or Ein Sof now. The only difference is the degree to which anything appreciates that the Or Ein Sof is present. There's a concealment of the Or Ein Sof.
Like even the angels wouldn't be able to, because I just as a random question, we can go on if it's like not about that. Even the angels, because they're in the Ilamas, the high elements, but they're still in the Makom. So they don't, we always just say in school, oh, Hashem commands the angels, or Hashem directs them, or they have one top kit, like whatever that means.
Yeah.
But they're commanded, they're not like, it's also like that some like they're not, you were saying the or in something like Ratzon Hashem, like, and it's part of it and it's clear or whatever, but like maybe that's makes sense in that case of like if
very good.
You know what I'm saying?
Very good.
You just don't know the Ratzon Hashem when you're in the Makom, but you could acknowledge it exists, you could say it exists, but you don't know it, and Hashem has to tell you, or you have to figure it out. I don't know.
Yes, so the Ratzon Hashem is there. The Ratzon Hashem is there, and depending on where in the Tzimtzum I am, it's more or less clear to me what that Ratzon is. in an obvious manifest. Now, why is it unclear? The reason why it's unclear is because there's something else operating. The other thing that might be that is operating, and it's always kind of, there's a zero-sum game, right? It's either all, right? We at the very, very top, we have all Ratzon Hashem, perfect clarity, or Ein Sof. At the very, very bottom, we have Klipa. And Klipa is totality of a total and absolute sense of self-existence, of independence, of self, of yeshus. I exist, and I'm independent, and there is nothing. I am me, and nothing determines who I am. I do whatever I want, and right. That's the epitome of the lowest level that exists within the Tzimtzum, where there's no clarity of the Orient, there's no clarity of the Ratzon Hashem, and all that's left when you remove clarity, when you remove the revealed or manifest presence of the Ratzon Hashem, what's left? What's left is me, selfishness, right? Not I'm a thing. I'm a thing. Bishvili nivra olam, but actually bishvili barati etza olam, right? I mean, I made the world just for me. It's not even the world was created for me. It's my world, and I made it, and I'll make it however I want, and it's all about me, right? At the lowest level. Everything in between is just gradations of how much clarity there is about the reality of Malach Haaretz Kavodo. And there's a Ratzon Hashem, and the Ratzon Hashem encompasses everything, and that really there's an Ein Sof. And the Ein Sof is Malach Kol Almin and Sovev Kol Almin, and surrounds everything and encompasses everything and fills everything, and everything is just that. And it's just gradations of balance between sense of self and sense of I'm part of the all-encompassing Ratzon Hashem, and things are floating along as they do. In our reality, we have a near, not always, but basically, and this is what produces our Bechira, we have a near perfect balance of clarity and unclarity. There's enough presence of a Kadosh Baruch Hu here for me to see it if I want to, if I choose to. And there's enough absence of the clarity of Hashem's presence for me to ignore it if I wanted to. I have enough of a sense of power, independence, kochi va'otzem yadi. I can do what I want, and I'm in control to actually go that way and do so reasonably. Right? Meaning, I think you see, I think you see often in certain Kier circles, right, that we can prove this, we can prove that, we'll prove the other thing, and now it's and look at all of the agnostics out there and how stupid they are. They don't appreciate the clear proofs that we're proving, right? But from this, I don't think that's correct at all. Actually, it's a perfectly in Olam Hazeh, it is a perfectly reasonable thing to say I'm an agnostic. It might even be a perfectly reasonable thing to say I am an atheist. For every evidence of God's presence and a higher power and so on and so forth, I can bring lots of evidence that that's not the case. It has to be that way, otherwise we wouldn't live in a world of Bechira. It's a balance. There's a balance of these things. Higher worlds, right? Higher olamos are places where there's a higher awareness, a higher consciousness of Ein Sof, and a lesser and greater sense of bittul, less yeshus, less me, less klipa. Less a sense of the physical world as an independent existence, and really it's just a Kadosh Baruch Hu. And the higher up I go, that becomes more clear and more clear and more clear and more clear. The lower I go, it becomes less clear and less clear and less clear. This is why, for example, the Zohar and the Arizal describe that the Chet Eitz Hadas, prior to the Chet Eitz Hadas, Olam Hazeh existed in a state of existed in a higher Olam state, and right, meaning the world was the world, but this world existed in instead of this being Olam Hasiyah or an expression of Olam Hasiyah, it existed in Olam Yitzira and Bria. Meaning the same reality that we find ourselves in, the same trees and the same grass and the same mountains and rivers and animals and people, and right, it's after the Sheshis Mebreshis. On Erev Shabbos, on the sixth day of creation, after Adam and Chava are created, the world exists in a higher state, in a higher olam, so to speak. The same world that we're in exists in a higher olam, and then when they eat from the tree, then it drops. then it drops. What's going on over there? What's happening is that prior to the Chet Eitz Hadas, the same physical world that we're in is a space in which we are experiencing, or we're given the opportunity to experience, a higher sense or a more clear sense of clarity that, oh, this is just God talking to me. All of this is just God manifesting in a million different ways. Right? Adam and Chava, Rabbi Nosson talks about this in many places, but others talking about this also, right? Adam and Chava, prior to Eitz Hadas, the Torah says they're naked and they're not embarrassed. Why are they not embarrassed? Because what's there to be embarrassed about? Everything is just pure Ratzon Hashem. If I'm naked, I'm naked. If I'm not naked, I'm not naked. I'm exactly the way I'm supposed to be. There's no alternative, and I can't do anything with my nakedness that is contrary to the Ratzon Hashem, because everything just runs according to the Ratzon Hashem all the time. There's no conflict between the way I'm supposed to act and the fact that I'm naked or something. There's no conflict, period. And then once you eat from the Eitz Hadas, or once we eat from the Eitz Hadas, once they eat from the Eitz Hadas, what are they doing? They're looking at the Eitz Hadas, and the fruit looks nice to eat, and it smells delicious, and it looks juicy. And the Nachash is saying, look at the fruit, it looks pretty good, right? And it's Eitz Hadas Tov V'Ra. And if you eat it, something, you'll get clarity, and you'll become like a Kadosh Baruch Hu, and accept, and they go, and what do they decide? They decide, I can do what I want. Hashem said don't eat from the tree, but actually I can eat from it if I want to, and not only can I eat from it, but I will eat from it, and everything drops, because now what just happened? What just happened is you elevated the power of I exist, of my yeshus, of I can do what I want, of not everything is clearly an expression of the Ratzon Hashem, for which I can't do anything else. Now I can choose to do different, because I exist as an independent being, as if I can exist in opposition to, or in contrast to, or against, in non-alignment with the Ratzon Hashem. And I will live that way, and now everything drops into a lower state, a lower consciousness, a lower olam, into the olam asiyah, where there's less clarity that there's Ratzon Hashem everywhere, right? And now what happens? Adam and Chava are now embarrassed, right? They're embarrassed. Hashem says, "Where are you?" And they hide, because they're embarrassed of what happened. Right beforehand, no one's embarrassed about what they do or don't do, because everyone appreciates that everything I do or don't do is pure Ratzon Hashem. It can't be otherwise. Anything that I did is Ratzon Hashem. Anything that I do is Ratzon Hashem. Bechira, even if I'm vaguely aware of such a concept, it barely even really exists, and only in potential, but not in actuality, because everything is the way it's supposed to be, because it is, and therefore it must be the way it's supposed to be. But after the Chet Eitz Hadas, things can be different from the way they're supposed to be, and I can make mistakes, and I can go against HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and now I'm ashamed of going against HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and now I need to put on clothes, because being naked can lead to all kinds of things that I'm not supposed to do, as if there are things I can do that are not what I'm supposed to do, which is a new realization that never occurred before. Right? So these levels of olamos are this. I don't remember exactly how we got into this, but yeah, I'm not. Malachim, right? So Malachim also even at a very, very high olam, right? Different levels of Malachim exist within different olamos, we're creatures of olam asiyah, but different Malachim live in Yitzira and Bria and so on and so forth, from our perspective, and we typically conceptualize Malachim this way, from our perspective, Malachim don't have free will. Malachim are just pure expressions of the Ratzon Hashem. Really, what is a Malach? A Malach is a discrete expression of the Ratzon Hashem. Hashem says, right, we see this all the time. We don't necessarily think of it this way, but from elementary school, Hashem sends 3 Malachim to Avram, and each one can do one thing. That's how Malachim work. Oh, okay, that's very interesting. That's how Malachim work. Why? Because what is a Malach? A Malach is a discrete expression of the Ratzon Hashem. It's God. It's Hashem willing Avram to be healed. So that's a Malach. That expression, that hashpa of Ratzon, is a Malach. And I will Sodom to be destroyed. That's a Malach doing that thing. So That's what a malach is. From our perspective, the malachim don't have bechira. They're just expressions of the Ratzon Hashem. They're not like us. They're much more ruchniistic creatures. But it means to be a more ruchniistic creature, you have less experience of gashmias. You have less experience of a material self in opposition or in contrast to the all-encompassing reality of a Kadosh Baruch Hu. Material self as in apples, oranges, tables, chairs, me and you, as opposed to they're all the same thing because they're all just expressions of the Ratzon Hashem. But from a Kadosh Baruch Hu's perspective, a malach is certainly materialized in a certain way, right? From a Kadosh Baruch Hu's perspective, a Kadosh Baruch Hu is all-encompassing. And now with particular malach that has materiality, that has structure, that has form, it's the malach to heal Avram, not the malach to destroy Sodom. So this malach is a particular thing. It's not me, and it's not truly an expression of my Ratzon Hashem. It's something else. And this gets into another worthwhile important point, which is within Penimiyus HaTorah, everything has to be taken as relative. All right, we're going to talk about lots of different things. And every time we talk about it, really, it's all a matter of perspective, of vantage. We're talking about Tzimtzum, right? So here also, Tzimtzum kipshuto, Tzimtzum shelo kipshuto. Rav Itchemeyer discusses this, and he emphasizes, and not only him, but many others emphasize this, that it's a matter, like everything else in Penimiyus HaTorah, it's a matter of perspective. Tzimtzum is kipshuto. Tzimtzum is literal and real. From our perspective. Seems that way. Rabbi Nachman says, this world, God is here. Have you been through this life before? Like, this is not I don't know where he is exactly. If Tzimtzum from our perspective might be kipshuto. From God's perspective, certainly shelo kipshuto. God is still there exactly the way he was from the very beginning. Nothing has ever really changed. All that shifted was perspective. From our perspective, something shifted, and from his perspective, something didn't shift. So perspective becomes important. So to talk about malachim as balancing this, yeshus and self-existence versus the all-encompassing Ar Ein Sof, it's a matter of perspective. From a Kadosh Baruch Hu's perspective, a malach is nothing. Malach is very material. It's very limited. It's very physical, so to speak, right? From God's perspective, look what it's being compared to. From our perspective, if this is what our reality is, then a malach is something that isn't physical, lacks bechira, doesn't have definition the way we imagine definition, and so on and so forth. Yeah. Okay. So in any case, Tzimtzum again. So Tzimtzum is a hiddenness, a hiding of the clarity that everything is a Kadosh Baruch Hu, or a hiding of the reality of this is what a Kadosh Baruch Hu really is. These are the midas of a Kadosh Baruch Hu. This is the full gamut and full expression of the Ratzon Hashem. That becomes hidden as a result of the Tzimtzum. Once you hide the full range of the Ratzon Hashem being expressed with clarity, so now I can understand why there's now space for creation to exist, right? Because now the Ratzon Hashem that's being expressed, or the way it's being experienced and seen, is not all-encompassing, and it's not all-annihilating. The yichud of things is missing. And so now there can be olamos, there can be neshamos. One neshama different from another neshama, seemingly, because it has a form, an outer form, and that outer form takes over. And that we look at it. I look at you, and I don't see a neshama. I see you, and you're different from me. Why are you different? Because I look at you, and I look at me, and we're different, right? You're sitting over there, and I'm sitting over here, and from an outer perspective, it seems that we're different. Why does that outer perspective hold true? It holds true because there's a concealment of the reality that you're just a neshama and I'm just a neshama, and really just our neshamas are just particular expressions, but beating within our neshama is just the Ar Ein Sof itself, or an expression or a ray of the Ar Ein Sof itself. And so there's no difference between me and you. But if that's hidden, then I see what's on the outside. I see the chitzonius. I see that we dress differently. We have different heights. We're wearing different glasses. We look different. We have different jobs. We're occupying different places at the table, and so on and so forth. So now creation can exist. Now things can exist. Now there's a possibility for differentiation. There's a possibility for things to exist within the Or Ein Sof. Okay? The Or Ein Sof is pulled away. The Arizal describes, and he's describing here, is pulled away to the sides, to the edges of a central point within the Or Ein Sof. So again, this can't be taken literally, because you can't talk about a central point within the Or Ein Sof. If the Or Ein Sof encompasses and constitutes all of existence and all of reality, there is no space, and so there's no center. There's no center. So what's the center of the Or Ein Sof? So the Kamarna talks about this, and the Kamarna Rebbe talks about this. Rav Itchemeyer talks about this also in a slightly different way. But what does it mean that the Or Ein Sof is mitzamtzim in its center? It's making space within the center of the Or Ein Sof for the Bria. The center of the Or Ein Sof is the etzem, is the essence of the Or Ein Sof, the deepest essence of the Or Ein Sof, the merkaz of the Or Ein Sof, the lave of the Or Ein Sof, the neshama of the Or Ein Sof, the essential self of the Or Ein Sof desires Tzimtzum. This is not the fact that the world looks the way it looks, and the fact that everything has unfolded the way it has unfolded, and the whole plan of I'm going to create a Tzimtzum so that there's an experience of materiality in the absence of a Kadosh Baruch Hu, so that you can rediscover me and then experience the greatest good in the world because you've earned the ability to experience my presence and dvekus with me. That's not peripheral. That's not accidental. It's essential. To whatever extent we can understand this to be the case, it's essential to what a Kadosh Baruch Hu really is all about. It's in the center. It's in the center of the Or Ein Sof, not the spatial center of the Or Ein Sof, but the conceptual center of the Or Ein Sof. The essence of what the Or Ein Sof is I want a Tzimtzum. I want this. I want to be diminished in order to give something greater over to others, to really fulfill my imperative to be good and to give good unto others. That's what I really, really want. And this Or Ein Sof that's removed from this center point to create the possibility of creation, it's moved away to the tzdadim, it's moved away to the edges of this circle, so to speak. Now, this is a circle. Circle is important. We find circles all over Penimiyus HaTorah. Circles are very important. Here, the circle, number one, defines to us that everything that exists within the Or Ein Sof, anything that exists within creation, is always equidistant from experiencing the ongoing hara, the ongoing light that's being expressed from the outside of the circle. The Or Ein Sof is still there. It's on the outside of the Tzimtzum. And everything within, nothing that exists within the Tzimtzum is any closer or farther to that light at any moment. It's always there, fully accessible in all ways, shapes, and forms, wherever we find ourselves. It doesn't matter, right? If you conceptualize it spatially, if you think of sort of a plane, and in the plane of Or Ein Sof, you have a black circle in the middle, right, flat on the table, and in that black circle you have vertically layers of olamos. It doesn't matter whether I'm in one of those higher olamos or I'm experiencing one of those higher olamos. It doesn't matter whether I just had a fantastic Ne'ilah on Yom Kippur, and it doesn't matter whether I just did the worst series of sins you could possibly imagine and find myself in the lowest places in the world of the Olam Asiyah, of Klipa, of I am, of me and no God here at all. God is still present. There's the Or Ein Sof is still accessible exactly the same way, exactly the same, no difference. We're not talking about a square, or we're not talking about a triangle where there are sides and there are angles, and some places are closer and some places are further. We're talking about a circle. Everything is equidistant from the Or Ein Sof. Every single point of reality, every single point of creation, no matter how high, no matter how low, no matter how dark, no matter how light, no matter how aligned or unaligned seemingly on the outside it is with the Ratzon Hashem, the Or Ein Sof that is still sitting on the edges, right? It's just been moved to the edges. It hasn't disappeared from the circle. It's been pushed away to the edges, but it's still there. Is always accessible in an equal way. It might take more to see it. It's, in certain ways, it's easier to see it on Ne'ilah and Yom Kippur than it is, I don't know, choose your favorite sin, whatever it is. But right, whatever the juiciest of air you can come up with is. It might be seemingly easier to access there, but the truth is that all you have to do is to be able to appreciate, and here's a very profound idea in Tzimtzum also, is that Tzimtzum itself is a creation of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, right? Tzimtzum itself, Rabbi Nachman talks about this. He sort of says that Tzimtzum is the ultimate paradox that we cannot possibly understand, because on the one hand, Tzimtzum has to be an absence of the Or Ein Sof in order for Tzimtzum to be Tzimtzum. Because if there's no absence or there's no concealment of the Or Ein Sof, then it's not a Tzimtzum. It's just Or Ein Sof as it was before. On the other hand, it can't be that there's an absence of a Kadosh Baruch Hu within the Tzimtzum, and it can't even be that there's a loss of clarity of a Kadosh Baruch Hu within the Tzimtzum, because Tzimtzum itself, the absence of a Kadosh Baruch Hu, is a creation, it's a bria, it's a new thing. Before the Tzimtzum, there was no absence of a Kadosh Baruch Hu. So if you're creating an absence, the creation itself has to be undergirded by the presence of a Kadosh Baruch Hu, because no creation can exist without a Kadosh Baruch Hu being present and being machaya and being mitzayer and being defining and magdir that creation in and of itself. So at the same time, Tzimtzum has to be both the presence and the absence of a Kadosh Baruch Hu by definition, which is an impossible paradox, which is why Tzimtzum is really the highest thing we can conceptualize. This is one of the reasons I think in Rabbi Nachman's Torah, for example, these places of darkness are very, very valuable. Places of spiritual darkness, which is one of the things that Tzimtzum is a metaphor for, are very are the most connecting places to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Places where we experience the presence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that's very nice. But places where you're missing the presence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is much deeper and much more profound, and you're actually experiencing something much, much higher. It's what you're experiencing in your own little way, right? Whatever it is, I get up in the morning and I put on tefillin and I try to daven and it's not working. That's a Tzimtzum of sorts, right? That's a Tzimtzum of sorts. I'm not experiencing the R right now. That's a Tzimtzum of sorts. That's a very, very high thing in Rabbi Nachman's Torah, because what I'm experiencing now is a manifestation of that original Tzimtzum in my own little Dalet Amos. And that thing is the most profound part. The thing that I'm experiencing is both the absence of a Kadosh Baruch Hu. I want to daven and it's just not going. The words aren't coming out. They don't mean anything. I'm very distracted, etc. I'm not experiencing anything. But the fact that I'm not experiencing anything is itself a phenomenon that's being created, which means God must be very, very present within this thing that I'm experiencing. And I'm not experiencing, and it's even more profound because what I'm experiencing is paradoxical, meaning it's beyond my understanding. If it's beyond my understanding, that's very godly. Things that I understand can't be so godly, because I can understand them and I'm not so bright. I'm just a person, right? But things that I can't understand, that's touching already something that's beyond me. That's something even more godly than the things I do appreciate. And so one of the avodas we see in Sifrei Chasidus all over the place is that when we experience Tzimtzum, right? Tzimtzum again is a metaphor for any experience, any experience of concealment of God's presence within our lives, of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's manifest presence within our lives. One of our jobs is to appreciate that what we're experiencing now is actually the presence of a Kadosh Baruch Hu. Every experience of Tzimtzum can be experienced as a presence of a Kadosh Baruch Hu, even just on the level of I'm experiencing something that Kadosh Baruch Hu is creating right now, and he's creating the experience of his absence. Okay, so now I just connected with you, and as opposed to thinking you're not here, even just connecting that thought to the experience that I'm having of Tzimtzum, of darkness, of spiritual atrophy, whatever you want to, katnas hamochin, which is a term we'll encounter later on. Hopefully, we'll get there. Right, constrained spiritual awareness. I can connect that thought very easily back to Kadosh Baruch Hu, and now it turns into something much bigger. And actually, what I end up doing is that I flood that Tzimtzum with a lot of art all over again. Okay. So that's we'll talk more. We'll talk more about Tzimtzum next time, Be'ezras Hashem, and we'll keep going from Tzimtzum to Kav and the reintroduction of Or into the Kav, into the Tzimtzum, and how everything comes from that. All right.
Thank you.